Dexter's secret wasn't as hidden as he thought. Over the years, several people uncovered the truth about his dark passenger. Let's break down 15 characters who found out what he really is. Coming in at number 1 on the list is the man who raised Dexter, Harry Morgan. Harry Morgan was the first person who realized that something was off with his son. He discovered that Dexter was killing and dismembering animals at a really young age. Harry's experience as a homicide detective told him that Dexter's behavior was a red flag. It's a trait that's pretty common in serial killers. Harry knew that if Dexter didn't learn to control himself, he'd end up behind bars or even on death row. So, to protect Dexter, Harry came up with a set of rules, known as the Code of Harry, which helped Dexter target the right people and avoid getting caught. The fateful day arrived when Dexter, now 20 years old, was entrusted by Harry with his first human kill. Nurse Mary, a monstrous caregiver who had been taking the lives of her vulnerable patients. But little did Harry know that his life was about to take a drastic turn. When he stumbled upon Dexter dismembering Juan Reynes, it freaked him out so much that he killed himself just 3 days later. The second person to find out about Dexter's secret life was his biological brother, Brian Moser. Brian and Dexter shared a horrific childhood trauma, having been present at their mother's gruesome murder and then left to fend for themselves in a shipping container surrounded by her mutilated body. The brothers' lives were forever altered when Detective Harry Morgan took Dexter in and raised him, but he abandoned Brian, thereby separating the brothers. Just like Dexter, Brian Moser, now the ice truck killer, was a master of disguise, able to conceal his true nature with ease. As an adult, Brian went looking for his younger brother Dexter, the only family he had left and the only one he really connected with. When Brian finally found Dexter, he was thrilled to see that his brother was just like him, a serial killer. Brian and Dexter's bond was formed through their traumatic experiences, and Brian tried to strengthen it by asking Dexter to kill Deb. Dexter wouldn't go through with it because it went against the Code of Harry, which forbade him from killing innocent people. Dexter had to kill his biological brother in order to protect Deb. After slicing his throat and draining his blood, Dexter covered up the murder by making it look like Brian took his own life. Detective James Dokes is the third individual to be identified on this list. From the first time they met, Dokes knew something wasn't quite right about Dexter. Dokes noticed that Dexter was always really calm at crime scenes and seemed to get a kick out of figuring out how the murders happened, which just added to his suspicions. Dokes' suspicions about Dexter led him to start digging, and eventually, he found proof that Dexter was a killer. One clue led to the next, eventually leading Dokes to sneak into Dexter's apartment. He thoroughly searched the place and soon discovered Dexter's box of blood slides, which he stole. Now Dokes had solid evidence that Dexter was a killer. Just when Dokes thought he was getting close to the truth, the FBI found the evidence in his car and turned the tables, making him the main suspect in the Bay Harbor butcher case. Dokes went into hiding and managed to track Dexter down to a cabin in the Everglades, where he caught him loading up body parts onto his boat. Dexter caught Dokes off guard, and after a brief fight, he locked him up in a cage. Dexter chose not to kill Dokes, and instead framed him for the Bay Harbor butcher's crimes. As Dexter's captive, Dokes witnessed the brutal murder and dismemberment of Jose Garza, a convicted murderer and drug dealer, through a plastic sheet barrier. Unfortunately, Dokes' fate took a tragic turn when Lila West, the fourth person on the list, discovered him at the cabin and, to protect Dexter, blew the whole place up. After Lila blows up the cabin, Garza's charred remains are found scattered around the ruins of the cabin. Combined with the weapons found at the scene, the FBI task force considers his body to be conclusive evidence that Dokes was the Bay Harbor butcher. At first, Lila seems like a really fun and caring person. It turns out that Lila is a lot more complicated than she seems, with a controlling personality, eccentric behavior, and a tendency to be obsessive and manipulative, not to mention her fascination with setting fires. Lila also liked going to support groups to see how people express their emotions, since she's not really capable of feeling anything herself. Lila sees right through Dexter's fake persona and is curious about the dark stuff he's hiding underneath. Initially, Lila misreads Dexter's behavior and assumes he's a heroin addict, but it's not until later that she learns the truth about him. By then, Lila is totally obsessed with Dexter and thinks he's the one for her. Things heat up between Lila and Dexter, but their romance is short-lived because Lila has a tendency to lash out violently when she feels betrayed, and she's not above using others for her own benefit. Her attention-seeking antics started to put Dexter's secret at risk, and her manipulative, unstable behavior eventually drove him away. When Lila tracked Dexter to the cabin using his GPS, Dokes told her that Dexter was the Bay Harbor butcher and begged her to release him. To protect Dexter, Lila blows up Dokes, killing him and keeping Dexter's secret intact. After Lila's twisted attempt to burn Astor and Cody alive, Dexter caught up with her in Paris and ended things with a fatal stab wound to the heart. The spotlight shifts, and Miguel Prado takes center stage as the next person on the list. It all began when Miguel Prado walked in on Dexter with a knife and bloody hands, just after he'd killed Fred Bowman. Miguel didn't freak out when he saw Dexter kill. Instead, he thought it was an opportunity to team up and fix the system. After meeting Dexter, Miguel tried to get past his defenses and get to know him better. To test Dexter's limits, Miguel gave him the opportunity to kill Ethan Turner, a notorious wife killer. Ethan's disappearance was all the proof Miguel needed to know Dexter had taken him out. Miguel and Dexter's partnership officially kicked off at this point. Over time, Dexter developed a sense of trust towards Miguel and actually thought of him as his best friend. Knowing Dexter was a killer, Miguel felt he had to take action. He wasn't one to just sit back and watch. He was always trying to get Dexter to let him help catch bad guys. Dexter gave in to Miguel's constant requests and let him be the one to kill Billy Fleeter. But this created an uncontrollable monster in Miguel that Dexter did not anticipate. Despite Dexter's objections, Miguel took the life of Ellen Wolfe, an innocent and unsuspecting lawyer. Miguel was unremorseful, and even told Dexter he'd do whatever he wanted to whoever he wanted. When he went after Maria Laguerta, Dexter had to step in and end their friendship for good. Lumen Pierce, the next person on the list, stumbled upon Dexter's secret by accident. Dexter discovered Lumen Pierce watching him as he took the life of Boyd Fowler. He decided not to kill her, as she was innocent despite the risk she posed to exposing him. Not knowing what to do with Lumen, he kept her locked up in an empty tourist center for the time being. At first, Lumen was scared of Dexter, but as time passed, her trepidation about Dexter's nature diminished, replaced by a deepening trust and reliance. Reluctantly, Dexter agreed to help her hunt down and eliminate members of the Barrel Girl gang, the men who raped and tortured her, which led to their bond deepening, eventually becoming lovers. Lumen Pierce is the first person to know Dexter's secret and not end up dead, which is kind of a big deal. Jordan Chase, who's next on the list, is the main antagonist in Season 5 of Dexter, but his story doesn't have a happy ending like Lumen's did. Behind a mask of wisdom and benevolence, Jordan Chase conceals a sinister reality, but to the unsuspecting public, he appears as a pillar of kindness and guidance. He's got a great image as a self-help guru, and people love his inspirational speeches at his seminars. But what his fans don't know is that Jordan is actually the leader of the Barrel Girl gang, a group of guys who torture and kill women. Even though Jordan's in charge, he doesn't actually take part in hurting the women. Jordan's thing is psychological torture. He uses his words and his watch to intimidate and control his victims. He is really careful not to leave any DNA evidence on his victims, and since he's using psychological torture, he doesn't need to touch them anyway. Jordan Chase eventually realized that Dexter and Lumen were murdering his men in revenge, all four, before they eventually killed him. Although Jordan Chase had knowledge of Dexter's serial killing tendencies, he never made the connection that Dexter was the infamous Bay Harbor butcher. Moving on to one of the most unconventional discoveries of Dexter's hidden life throughout the show, made by Nicholas Galway, whose circumstances of discovery were particularly unusual. The thing is, Galway was a retired priest and lived in a nursing home. He had a really severe case of dementia, and Dexter's visit triggered a false memory in him, thinking Dexter was someone from his past. Dexter's investigation led him to Galway, and after talking to him for a bit, he realized how bad Galway's memory loss was. Dexter's realization about Galway's memory loss gave him the audacity to confess his own sinister truth, that he was a serial killer. Galway initially condemned murder as a mortal sin, but his memory loss kicked in, and he forgot all about it. Dexter reminded Galway that he was in the middle of confessing, and Galway, thinking he was a priest, forgave Dexter for all the bad things he'd done, including the people he'd killed. Following Galway's words of forgiveness, Dexter offered his thanks and left the room. Dexter's adoptive sister, Deborah Morgan's unintentional discovery of Dexter's secret life, constituted one of the most suspenseful and emotionally resonant moments in the show. Deborah Morgan entered a church precisely as Dexter was committing a heinous act of violence, fatally stabbing Travis Marshall on the altar. At first, Deborah bought Dexter's story, but then she started connecting the dots and realized something crazy was going on. Here's the thing. Deborah was all about justice and doing what's right, while Dexter had his own way of dealing with things, which was often pretty dark. Deborah and Dexter frequently found themselves on the same trail, hunting down the same killers. Seeing Travis wrapped in plastic brought back bad memories for Deborah, reminding her of the time she was on the ice truck killer, Brian Moser's table. In pursuit of truth, Deborah decided to investigate her brother thoroughly, and her search of Dexter's apartment turned up some disturbing evidence, including blood slides and the tools he used to commit his crimes. Deborah waited for Dexter to come home and then asked him directly if he was a serial killer. He had no choice but to come clean. Dexter's secrets were unexpectedly discovered by Hannah McKay, a serial killer with a complex and troubled background, through a means that was both surprising and unconventional. Everything started when Dexter found out Hannah McKay was a killer and decided to target her. After digging deep into Hannah's past, Dexter figured she was a worthy target for his next kill. Dexter managed to gain Hannah's trust and convinced her to go on a fake date, where he drugged her and got her ready for his twisted ritual. But in the end, Dexter didn't go through with it. It turned out he had developed an irrational sexual attraction to her. Instead of ending her life, he ripped through the plastic, and they succumbed to an unexpected moment of passion on the kill table. Afterwards, Hannah asked Dexter why he'd planned to kill her, and he said he only kills people who are really bad. Dexter and Hannah's attraction turned into a relationship, and he finally felt like he could be himself around someone. Isaac Serko was the next to figure out Dexter's secret, and he did it all by himself. Isaac was a big shot in the Koshka Brotherhood, which was based in Kyiv, Ukraine, where he lived. He also owned a bunch of strip clubs in Florida. Things kicked off when Isaac headed to Miami to find out what happened to Viktor Baskov, one of his men who vanished while running their local operations. One clue led to another until Isaac Serko found the signal from Kaya Soroka, the murdered stripper's tracking bracelet, on Dexter's boat. Knowing it was the same bracelet that Viktor Baskov had with him before he disappeared, Isaac correctly deduced that Dexter had killed Viktor and dumped him in the ocean. He became determined to kill Dexter simply for revenge, majorly because Viktor Baskov was his lover. While Isaac was out for revenge, he confronted Dexter, who admitted to being a serial killer and that Viktor was not his first victim. Maria Laguerta, the head of Miami Metro Homicide, started suspecting Dexter when she found a bloodslide at the scene of Travis Marshall's murder. This led Captain Laguerta to reinvestigate the Bay Harbor butcher case in an effort to clear Detective James Doak's name. Soon, Dexter became Captain Laguerta's top suspect, and she even arrested him. But he turned the tables, making it look like she set him up. Maria's suspicions were confirmed, and she became certain that Dexter was responsible for the series of killings. Dexter figured Maria wasn't going to give up gathering evidence against him. To neutralize the threat, Dexter orchestrated a scenario that led the authorities to believe Hector Estrada, a prominent figure in a drug cartel, and Maria Laguerta had fatally shot each other. Now to Dr. Evelyn Vogel, a renowned neuropsychiatrist with expertise in psychopathic disorders, was aware of Dexter's true nature long ago. Dr. Vogel knew about Dexter's killer instincts since he was a kid, specifically when he was just 10 years old, which was way before anyone else. You'd think she'd be wary of him, but instead, she was really proud of him. After thinking it over, Dexter chose to spare Dr. Vogel's life, figuring she could provide valuable insights into his behavior and its origins. Plus, she had a hand in creating the code with his dad. Sadly, Dr. Vogel's closeness to Dexter led to her own son killing her. As we get close to the end of the list, the next to last person is Zach Hamilton. To protect his mom from getting hurt, Zach Hamilton took drastic action and murdered his dad's mistress. He also didn't stop there and tried to kill his dad. Zach Hamilton's reckless actions landed him on Dexter's kill table, where he learned that Dexter was a serial killer. Right before he got killed, Zach admitted that he also had a strong urge to kill. Since Zach reminded Dexter of himself, he chose not to kill him. Dexter took Zach under his wing and taught him Harry's code to help him channel his dark energy. But things ended badly when Zach got murdered by the notorious brain surgeon. In the final position on our list, we find Oliver Saxon, a notorious individual who earned the chilling moniker of the brain surgeon. Before settling in Miami in 2008, Oliver Saxon had already killed people in various cities as a traveling serial killer. He got the nickname the brain surgeon because he would scoop out a piece of brain from each of his victims. Oliver Saxon hacked into Dr. Vogel's computer and got his hands on her Dexter files. As a result, Saxon had the lowdown on Dexter's life story and his secret life as a serial killer. Oliver Saxon went to Dexter's apartment, pretending to try to buy it. But what he really wanted to do was compliment Dexter on his amazing cover life, complete with a son, sister, and girlfriend. After Saxon was locked up, Dexter told him that looking back on his life, all he saw was a trail of blood and bodies. With a pen, Dexter punctured Saxon's carotid artery and made it seem like self-defense. For more on Dexter, click on this video and try not to be Dexter's next victim.